Ephraim and I, we're going over the story of Shimshon, Samson in English, and we're going to use the Hebrew Shimshon. And so here we are now. We're standing atop a mountain. You can see all around, beautiful valleys and mountains all around. We are in the center of the tribe of Dan, and we are atop a place called Tel Tzorah. Tzorah, or in English, Zorah. In English, it's usually spelled Z-O-R-A. In Hebrew, it has the tzaddik at the beginning, Tzorah. Tzorah is the place where Shimshon and his family were from. The first verse of the story of Shimshon in the book of Judges says there was a man from Tzorah and his name was Manoah. So it starts here, and here we are. We are in the Tel, we're in the archeological site. In the book it starts out by saying there was a man from Tzorah, and then he tells us that his wife went into the field. So the Bible gives us geographical information. So I think that God wants us to go and see these places. If you look around, you can see that there are all around us remnants of people living here. On the way up, Ephraim, what did you pick up on the ground over there?
I saw a pottery handle stuck in the ground. Tried to get it out, but it was embedded. Yeah, it was clearly pottery and not rock, and had its own unique shape to it.
Ephraim, you're not supposed to take antiquities with you.
Why?
They're everywhere, thousands of them, which means there were people living here. This was an ancient site. The archaeologists confirmed that this place was settled in what we call the period of the Judges, which is basically the transition between the Bronze and the Iron Age. And it was an Israelite city in that time, the time of the Judges, the time of Shimshon. And what's really so amazing is exactly where we're standing right now. Because right here, at the top of the Tel, the archaeological site of the city, we're standing in a wine press. This is a wine press, okay? And why is a wine press so amazing? Because the story starts out that the angel comes to Shimshon's mother.
An angel of God appeared to a woman and said to her, "You are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or other intoxicant, or to eat anything unclean, for you are going to conceive and bear a son. Let no razor touch his head, for the boy is to be a Nazirite to God from the womb on, and he will begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines."
I think it's really special to read it in the place, and really part of what this tour is about, and all the tours that I'm going to do with you guys, is about seeing how the story comes to life when we follow the map that God gave us in the book. So the angel tells her, do not drink wine, do not eat grapes, do not come in contact with anything tameh, anything contaminated, because already from the womb this boy has to be a Nazirite. And he tells Shimshon's mother that already now, when you become pregnant with him, you need to observe these things until after he's born. And so what's so amazing is we're standing now in a wine press. So that means that when Samson's born, he's born here in Tzorah. So imagine what it was like in the ancient times when they were making wine. It was the happiest time of the year. How does the agricultural calendar work? You know, in the winter, like maybe December, January, the rain starts to fall. After the first rain, you plow the fields. When the second rain is about to come, you sow the wheat. And then through the spring, through the late winter and the spring, the wheat starts to sprout up. By the end of the spring, around Passover time, March, April, you start the process of the wheat harvest and the barley harvest. And by Shavuot, which comes in the early summer, you finished all the harvest of the wheat. But then what happens? Then you move into the harvest of the fruits, especially the grapes. And really one of the last things that you harvest that's hard work to harvest is the grapes. So imagine after a whole season of plowing and planting and tending and then harvesting, and this was done by all the families. They would all go out into the field with the sickles and bend down and harvest the wheat and the barley. And now you harvest the grapes. So when you harvested the wheat, what did you get out of it? You got to eat some fresh kernels of wheat, maybe some fresh bread. It's nice, right? But when you harvest the grapes, it's all sugar, right? You're harvesting the grapes, they're sweet, they're delicious. You're eating them while you're harvesting them. Then everybody is coming into a wine press like this, and maybe it's sort of hard to tell, but you see the tiles on the floor, and you see the hole in the middle, which used to be much, much smaller. And basically you would dump all the grapes into this area, and maybe 30 people would be standing here, dancing like this on their bare feet, squishing the grapes. And the reason they did it that way is because when you make wine, you don't want the seeds to get broken. You want to break the skins, you want to get the juice out, but you don't want to break the seed because the seed makes the wine bitter. So they would be dancing on the grapes, and all the families are out here. Everyone's on a sugar high. They're drinking fresh grape juice, and they know that this is the end of the harvest season. They're singing, they're celebrating, they're dancing because they're dancing on the grapes. So while you dance on the grapes, you have songs that you sing, you have poems and songs that people would sing to just keep the rhythm going and keep them motivated. Maybe someone would play music to keep everybody going. But Samson, who was born and raised here in Tzorah, and like it says, "V'tachel ruach Hashem lefa'amo b'machaneh Dan ben Tzorah o ben Eshtaol," the Spirit of God began to resound in him in the camp of Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol, which is this area. This is Zorah here, and Eshtaol is the next hilltop over. Shimshon grows up all around this culture. And imagine every year, after he works hard with everybody else, when it gets to the time of the most fun part, the most exciting part, he has to go stay away because he's not supposed to touch the grapes. He's not supposed to get close to them. So already coming here, we have a little bit of an insight into who is this person, Shimshon, and how is he growing up.
Hey guys.
Hey Raphael. So did you learn something so far?
So I think I got a rough idea of where we are.
Yeah.
This is the place where Samson grew up, and so Samson was this Nazareth unto God. His mother got the instruction from an angel. Do we know what angel that was? Or?
Manoah is very skeptical.
Yeah.
He says, really?
What's
Who
his
is this
name?
guy?
What's his name?
What's going on with him? And he turns to God and he says, God, if what the woman says is true, if it's true, send him back to me, please. I want to talk to him myself. The angel is not named, and in fact, we're going to see when we get down to the field, when the angel appears, Samson's father Manoah is so skeptical still, even after he saw the angel himself, that he says to him, maybe tell me what your name is. And the angel says to him, if I told you my name, you wouldn't understand it.
Wow.
You wouldn't understand it. So
A lofty angel.
Manoah, we see him as like someone who's very skeptical, very measured, very hesitant to jump to conclusions. His wife is like a woman of faith. Even though she's barren, you see her faith from the very beginning. The angel talks to her and she runs to tell her husband. And then the angel comes back and she runs to get her husband. And then the angel comes to them and Manoah is questioning him and everything. And we're going to see that the angel ends up ascending in a flame of fire to heaven. And Manoah, he freaks. He falls on his face and he says, we're going to die. We're going to die. And his wife says to him,
Don't worry.
why do you think God would do all this just to kill us?
I feel like that's a quality that you find generally between women and men, that men have a stronger resistance to like spiritual phenomenon, and women usually have an easier time accepting and opening, and usually when you have to like get the man to break it really you have to break him, like, and then it comes to
Raphael, are you going to start generalizing about men and women? We're
No,
going to get in trouble here.
I know.
These
Listen,
days you can't say such things.
well, I'm if anything, I'm opting for the women's
All right.
sensitivity.
If
and
you're saying
ability.
women are better, you could get away with it.
Right, okay.
No, but it's very true. I mean, look, women, they nurture life inside of them. You know, how can you nurture life inside of you and see new life emerge and not feel something spiritual? Men are more disconnected, so obviously it's true. He says, tell me your name so that when your prophecy comes true, we can give you credit. And the angel then says, you wouldn't understand it. So he says, well, let us slaughter a goat in your honor since you told us such great news. And the angel says, if you're slaughtering it to God, sacrifice it to God, not to me. If
Right.
it's like a sacrifice, don't sacrifice to me, sacrifice
I
to
don't
God.
worship.
But if you want to honor me and feed me, I don't eat of your food.
Right.
But Manoah anyway, so he says, fine, I'm going to sacrifice it. So he slaughters it and he offers it to God on a altar of stone.
Okay.
And the flame of the altar goes up and the angel jumps into the flame and ascends to heaven. So we know where the fields are, more or less. It's down there.
Okay.
So let's go down there. Let's go to the fields and let's see if we can find the location where it happened. So we're now entering into the Hartuv industrial zone, which is just outside of modern Bet Shemesh. And the industrial zone is actually built on the fields of ancient Tzorah. So when we get there, you're going to see that the mountain is just above us, and this industrial zone is built sort of in the shadow of the mountain in the low area above the ancient city of Tzorah. And the industrial zone really swallowed up most of the fields of Tzorah, but there's still a little patch of the field which is untouched by the industrial zone. And that's the area where we're going to go to try to look for the story of the angel appearing to Manoah's wife, Shimshon's mother, while she was in the field.
Crazy.
So guys, we are here. We're in the field. There is Tzorah. And this is the fields. Behind us is Bet Shemesh. To the left of us is Eshtaol. This is the area. Manoah's wife, if she's going into a field, it's going to be these fields. The fields which are not too far away from the mountain where she lives, but they're also not on the other side of the mountain where the Philistines are headed towards the coast, towards the area of Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and so on and so forth, where the Philistines live. So we should expect to find the altar here in this field. It says, and Manoah took the goat kid and the meal offering and brought them up on the rock to God, right? But what does it say in Hebrew? In Hebrew, let's find it. It says here, Vayikach Manoah, and Manoah took et gedi ha'izim, the goat kid, vet hamincha, and the meal offering, v'yal al ha-sur. He brought it on the sur. Now, how do you normally say rock in Hebrew?
Heaven.
Evan, right?
Yeah.
But there are other words for rock. Anyone who speaks Hebrew knows that there's more than one word for rock. There's Evan, there's Tzur,
Selah.
Selah, right? Very good. So each word has a different kind of meaning. So what is Evan? Evan means like any rock. If I come over here, for example, and I pick up this rock, this is an Evan. I can pick it up, I can move it. This is an Evan. Selah, it means like the bedrock here of the ground, that I stand on it. It's low, it's flat, it's the bedrock, that's Selah. But what is Tzur? Tzur is an outcropping of the bedrock. It's a rock that sticks up, that's part of the bedrock, but it's not flat and low-laying like that you could walk on it. So already we have a hint that the place where Manoah brought the offering is at Tzur. We need to look for something that's sticking out of the bedrock. And in Hebrew it says that Vayikach Manoah et gdi ha'izim vet mincha. Manoah took the offering and he put it on the Tzur, on the rock, and then it says Vayal malach Hashem belahav hamizbeach, and the angel of God went up in the fire that was on the altar, the mizbeach, the altar. So that means that we have here something which is two things in one. It's an outcropping of the bedrock, and it's also a mizbeach. Now, normally when we think of a mizbeach, an altar, we think of something that's built of many stones. But here it's called Tzur. It's an outcropping of the bedrock. So just from reading the verses in the original Hebrew and knowing what the words mean, you would assume that whatever altar Manoah brought the offering on should be carved out of a single piece of bedrock, as opposed to a regular altar that's built. Okay, maybe let's reschedule because it's supposed to rain, and then I said, no, it's going to be okay. And I thought I was right.
this is exactly how it's written, and it's unique, as in it's not a normal shape of any rock you see sticking out, and it's an exact location. I mean, I don't know what else could it be. This is...
Yeah, so this is a piece of tzur. It's bedrock that's sticking up. It's an outcropping of the bedrock, just like it says in the book of Shoftim, Judges. And it's also a mizbeach. It's carved all around with what's called the sovev, which is the ridge that the Kohanim would stand on when they bring the sacrifices on top. You can see it's obviously partially broken down, so you don't have the full square of the mizbeach. But this has been checked, and actually the four sides face the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, just like the altar in Jerusalem. So everyone who has researched this has said absolutely, what we know for sure, this is an altar from the time of the judges, approximately. The question is this the altar of Manoah or not? So let me just lay out the case why I think, maybe not 100% sure, but I think there's a very strong case for this location, because number one, look at where we are. We are in the fields of Tzorah. So you would expect the altar to be in this area. Number two, we have here one of only 2 altars ever discovered in the land of Israel that are carved out of bedrock. One of only 2. Every other altar that's ever been discovered by archaeologists was built up of many rocks. This one, together with one other next to Shiloh, is carved out of the bedrock, and the Bible says explicitly that it is both the bedrock and it is an altar. So that's already very strong, but I'll tell you something even more. There was a researcher of the land of Israel. His name was Yosef Breslavi. He was born in Ukraine in the late 1800s. He came here as a child to the land of Israel with his family on Aliyah. And he grew up here in the land of Israel, and he led a very interesting life. He fought in World War I under the Ottoman Turks, and then he helped the early members of the Haganah, the Jewish Defense Forces, to train themselves using the training that he received from the Turks. And then he went to Germany to study archeology and biblical criticism and all kinds of fields of study. And then Hitler came to power, so he came back to the land of Israel. And he was researching in this area, and he writes that one day he was sitting in the courtyard of Har Tuv. Har Tuv is a settlement that used to be in this area. Today, this industrial zone is called the Har Tuv Industrial Zone because the settlement is no longer, but the industrial zone takes its place. He was sitting in the courtyard of Har Tuv. He saw the fields near the settlement, and there was an Arab man, an Arab farmer, plowing his fields with his wife walking behind him and sowing seeds in the lines of the plow. And he said, I thought to myself, look, it's Manoah and his wife, brought back from the Bible. The man walking and the woman walking behind him. What he doesn't say is that in the story, the wife runs ahead and the woman and the husband follows his wife. Here the woman was following her husband, so it's not quite Manoah and his wife. But he said he felt like he was brought back to the Bible. And then the man gestures to him and says, come here, come here. And he goes to the man, and the man says, come with me. And he takes him past where he's plowing, and they're walking through nice plowed fields right here in this area, and he brings them to this rock. And he says to him, Hada Madbacha Manoah. This is the altar of Manoah. And so this researcher, Breslavi, he was shocked, and he didn't know what to say. And when he started looking into it more, he came to understand what we just talked about, that these are the fields of Tzorah. This is an altar on bedrock. And since then, some tests have done by scientists here, and they have verified that this is an altar for sacrifice. And so when you take into consideration the location, the fact that it's bedrock and it's also carved as an altar, the fact that it's been confirmed as an altar that was used in that time, and the fact that the Arabs have a tradition about it, that they call it the Mizbeach of Manoah, the altar of Manoah, to me it's a very strong, powerful case that this is indeed the altar. Every God-believing tourist, whether they're Jewish or of any other religion that believes in the Bible, every tourist who comes to Israel should be shown this place. This is the place where the angel went to heaven. This is an altar right out of the pages of the Bible. People come to Israel and they go to see all kinds of beautiful sights. the port of Akko and Caesarea and many sites which are all beautiful and have wonderful history. But this is really like core to who we are as a people. This is our history from the time of the judges, going back over 3,000 years, the time of Samson, and it's a shame that it's in this situation. But in the meantime, it's really an honor to come here.
Cool. I feel like it's especially cool because of like how low key it is.
Yeah.
Like it's not like surrounded with all these tourists and like, I mean, it's a shame like you were saying, but it's also like makes it feel more special. Like I feel like we really went through an adventure to find this place.
Yeah, you can drive by this and not notice it at all.
Yeah, which most things that are good in life usually have that as a factor.
Yeah.
That you could just drive right by and not notice, because it's like the bush of Moshe.
Yeah.
People just went through, they didn't realize. So this is like a hidden gem in the country. Like
The ones who pay attention to little details.
Yeah.
I really want to dig something up.
They find it. And it's like you have to be knowledgeable. Like if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's just a rock.
I've been here many years. I don't think I've ever been here.
Yeah, no, it's the same. I would think like this is, and like people are probably wondering like, what are these guys doing in the middle of the field, like looking at some rock? Like they're trying to do their work and move some cement around.
Yeah.
The other guy was like waving, you know, like he was wondering what we were doing here.
Yeah.
I wonder if he knows there's like one of the holiest spots in the whole world. Just
I don't know.
Just here.
Well, it's something where you can clearly see something carved.
Yeah.
In a uniform manner.
For sure.
But you can easily drive past it and not see it.
Yeah, you don't think twice.
Get
But it
up
definitely
close.
demarks itself once you pay attention, like you give it attention, and it suddenly reveals itself. Like,
Get up
wow,
close.
it's so crazy. I'm like having visions of like the sacrifice being done, and it like going up into a fire into the heavens, you know, like. And now we are like 3,000. I don't know. I probably got that number wrong, but like 1,000 years later, you know, just like standing here.
3,000? 2.5?
2.5, you would say? What's the estimate?
The period of the judges was over 3,000 years ago.
3,000.
I got that right.
There you go.
I feel like I should offer up something.
You could say a prayer.
No, actually, I want to keep this. I'm sorry,
If he offers that, does he have to keep it?
Oh wow.
I would leave it there if I were
I
you.
would leave it there, yeah.
I'm gonna get some more. And the fact that I want it, it makes my offering even higher.
And Shem's got it on camera.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to this part of the story yet, but later in the story, Samson gets arrested by the tribe of Judah because he's making so much trouble that the people of the tribe of Judah, who live actually right down there in Bet Shemesh, they're fed up. They say, you know what, this troublemaker from Dan, from the tribe of Dan, is causing the Philistines to take revenge on us. We got to put an end to him. So they come, 3,000 men of Judah, to arrest Samson. And Samson says, fine, you got me. I won't resist arrest as long as you promise that you're not going to kill me. If you don't touch me, I'll let you give me over to the Philistines. So they arrest him, they put his arm in chains and handcuffs of sorts, and they hand him over to the Philistines, and he breaks the handcuffs off. And what does he find? He finds the skeleton of a chamor, of a donkey. Okay, and here, I don't think this is the skeleton of a donkey, I think this is the skeleton of a lamb maybe. Okay, if there's any veterinarians watching, they can tell me. But he takes the skeleton of the donkey and he takes out of it the jawbone. You can see that the jawbone is shaped like a hammer, like that. This is probably the upper jaw. Maybe he took the lower jawbone, okay? And he takes it in his hand. With the hammer of the jawbone, he kills 1,000 Philistines. So he names the place Lehi, Ramat Lehi, the hilltop of the jawbone. Lehi in Hebrew means cheek or jawbone, based on that he killed 1,000 Philistines with the cheek of with the jawbone of the chamor. And here we are, we're spending a day talking about Shimshon, and we come across this jawbone.
When we were in the car, I was reading this, and I asked you, did Shimshon actually take a live donkey and take it out? And you told me that no, there's probably animal carcasses that sort of decomposed, and he probably grabbed one of the bones. I'm like, okay, maybe. And then we come here looking for the altar, and then before you know it, we find a jawbone of, I don't know about a lamb, but whatever it is, it's a jawbone of some animal.
So just like it happened to Shimshon, when he needed it, God provided it. We needed it to show you, and here God put it to complete the story.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And now the sun opens up on it. Wow. Unbelievable. Just wash your hands after that.
The Spirit of God began to resound at him in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Shimshon went down to Timnah.
Timnath. And then right in front of that body of water, there is a raised mound. In front of it, sort of to the left, that is the archeological site of Timnah. Okay? And it's been excavated by archaeologists and identified as Timnah. So what that means is that Samson was living up here and he could see the Philistines down there. Now, the acoustics here are such that if a car goes driving down this road, you can hear it. If a person is standing down there and yells, you can hear them yelling. I want you to imagine what Samson is experiencing. Samson is an Israelite from the tribe of Dan. Not only is he a regular Israelite, but he's a bearded, long-haired, sort of, unkempt Israelite, right? And you need to understand, and this is something that a lot of people miss when they're reading the stories of Israel and the Philistines. When I say the word Philistine, what comes to your mind?
Heathen.
A heathen. Or, like in the old movies, they'll say, if a man acts rudely to a woman, she'll say, "Oh, you Philistine, you," right? Even in English, we use the word Philistine to mean someone who has no manners, someone who's like who's a barbarian of sorts, right? That's not the case. If anything, if anyone were, let's say, without manners in the sense of culture and so on and so forth, it was the Israelites. The Israelites were very simple people. They lived in the mountains. They were farmers. They were bearded. They wore simple clothing. If you look at the pottery of the Israelites, it's very simple pottery. It's very plain. It's undecorated. The Philistines, on the other hand, they were not from here. They brought an exotic and interesting and highly developed culture to the land. For example, the Israelites at this time were still in the Bronze Age. They still didn't have the ability to make iron. But the Philistines did make iron. They made swords of iron. They made chariots with iron axles. Their technology was more advanced than the Israelites. And if you look in archaeology at the dishes, the jugs, the plates, the cups of the Philistines, you'll see that they're extremely ornate, very fine quality. So imagine Samson, he grew up his whole life up here between Zorah and Eshtaol in the Israelite camp where everything is very simple and God-fearing. But from time to time, when he's wandering around this hilltop where he lives, he looks down. And imagine if there in Timnah there was a wedding celebration and the women are dancing in their colorful dresses. Do you think he'd be able to hear their singing? He could smell the smells, he could hear the sounds right from here. But until this point, he never gave in to his temptation to go check it out. We're talking about Samson having a wedding, and just look right over here what's going on. There's some people who came here to do wedding photographs, and that's the music you hear in the background. But then it says, and Shimshon went down to Timnah. He went down to Timnah. Now the rabbis in the Talmud, they have a big dilemma regarding this verse. They say that we find two people in the Bible who went to Timnah. One is Judah, who went there to meet with his daughter-in-law Tamar, and the other one is Samson, who went to meet the Philistine woman. But when Judah goes to Timnah, it says Vaya'al Yehuda Timnata. Judah went up to Timnah. When Samson goes to Timnah, it says Vayered Shimshon Timnata. Samson went down to Timnah. What's the difference between Judah who goes up and Samson who goes down? And so one explanation that we can give is a simple geographical explanation. Samson, who lived here on this high mountain of Tzorah, in order to go to Timnah, even though Timnah sits on a hilltop, it's a low hilltop. So he went down to Timnah. But Judah, who was coming through the valley from the area of Adullam, he's on the road, and then from the road he has to go up to Timnah. So that's why it says Veyal Yehuda Timnata. This is a geographical explanation. But the rabbis in the Talmud, they give also a different explanation. They say there's also a moral lesson here, which is that what was the outcome of each of these two people going to Timnah? Judah, he went to Timnah, and as a result of that, he gave birth to a son named Peretz, who ultimately was the progenitor of King David, who ultimately is the progenitor of the Mashiach. May he come soon, God willing. Whereas Samson, he went to Timnah and he got caught up with Philistine women, and this ultimately led to his death. And we don't know anything about Samson's descendants, anything great coming about from them. And so Judah went up to Timnah. In other words, by going to Timnah, he ascended to the seat of the throne of ultimately the house of David and ultimately the Messiah, the Mashiach. And Samson went down to Timnah. By going down to Timnah, he descended spiritually. Samson and his parents, they show up for the wedding, and they show up without anybody. And you can imagine the Philistine parents of this girl thinking to themselves, this poor barbarian Samson, doesn't he know that you come to a wedding with your brothers and your sisters and your cousins and everything? So the parents of the Philistine woman, they bring 30 men to sit with Samson, and the games are going on, and there's riddles and everything. And then Samson says, I can do this, I can make a riddle. And he thinks about the lion, and he thinks about the honey that was in the carcass of the lion. And so he poses a riddle to the Philistines. But he doesn't do a gentleman's wager like they're doing. Most people were doing wagers, I bet you $30 that you can't guess this riddle. What does Samson wager? He says, I bet you 30 sets of clothing and 30 sheets. Now you have to understand, in the ancient world, clothing is very expensive. People would work for months for one set of clothing. And Samson is betting 30 sets of clothing and 30 sheets. I don't know if that's worth $30,000, $50,000, $100,000. It's a lot. It's a lot of money that he's betting. And you can just imagine these 30 Philistine guys. They were brought over just to do Samson a favor, right? They're just trying to be nice. And here Samson is putting them on the spot. And he's challenging them to a wager way beyond their means. So you could just imagine them saying, well, what do we do? If we refuse to take him up, then we look stood up by this barbarian, that he's going to outwit us in a bet and a riddle. But if we lose, we're going to be impoverished. But because they don't want to look bad, so they take him up on the bet. And what is the riddle? He says, from the strong comes something sweet, and from the eater comes something to eat. That's a poor translation into English of the riddle in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the riddle sounds better. But in any case, Samson is giving a riddle based on the lion. So what happens? The Philistines try to answer the riddle, and they can't come up with the answer. So after a few days go by, when the deadline is coming closer, they go to Samson's new wife, and they say to her, hey, you decided to go marry this Israelite barbarian, and look at what position you've put us in. We were just trying to be nice to you. We were just trying to do you a favor and save the honor of your family. But now we are going to become impoverished because of you. If you do not get the answer out of that barbarian husband of yours, we're going to set your house on fire and your parents' house on fire. So Samson's wife is in a bad situation, and she starts to nag Samson. Please tell me the answer of the riddle. You don't really love me. If I'm your wife, why don't you tell me the part of the riddle? I want to know the answer. And Samson keeps saying to her, I didn't tell my mother the riddle. I didn't tell my father the riddle. Why would I tell you the answer to the riddle? But she nags him and she bugs him until finally he tells her that the answer is what is stronger than a lion and what is sweeter than honey. And so she goes and she tells the answer of the riddle to the rest of the Philistines. And as the sun is about to set, just like this time of day, on the deadline, when they have to give the answer to the riddle or pay up, they say to Samson, Samson, what is stronger than a lion and what is sweeter than honey? And Samson, you could imagine his nostrils flaring up and his eyes turning bloodshot, and you could just imagine him Becoming furious, he says the following words: "Had you not plowed with my heifer, you would not know the answer to my riddle." He's basically accusing them of getting the answer from his wife, and maybe even something more than that, if you read between the lines. And in any case, he becomes infuriated. His word is his word. A bet is a bet. And he lost, and he has to pay up. But he is going to pay up in his own way. He goes marching all the way down to the coast to one of the Philistine cities. And he finds 30 Philistines, and he kills them, and he takes their clothing from them. And you can imagine him taking a sack, one by one, stripping these Philistines of their clothing, dripping in blood, filling the sack, putting it over his back. And you can imagine him marching all the way through the valley here and coming back to Timnah and knocking on the door of whoever is the one who represents this group that he has to pay, and saying, "Here is your 30 sets of clothing, your 30 sheets." And he's holding a dripping, bloody bag of clothing and drops on the doorstep and marches off. Samson comes storming back home, and his Philistine in-laws are now at a loss. They essentially said, "Okay, this man is insane. We tried to do everything for him, but we are having the marriage annulled." And they have the marriage annulled, and they marry his wife to someone else. In the meantime, some time goes by. Samson calms down. He's feeling better. And now it's the wheat harvest time. And now if you look in the valley, everything is green. Those are wheat fields till today. And so it's the harvest time. The harvest time is a time of holidays. It's a time when people are always in a good mood, because now they have the fruit of all of their labor. And so Samson decides to go visit his wife and bring her a gift for the harvest season. He brings her a young goat. Was it a goat or a lamb? He brings her an animal to have a feast for the holiday. And he comes to the door with the animal in his arm. And he knocks on the door. And you can imagine the scene of his in-laws opening the door and seeing him standing there like this with a gift, with a ribbon tied on it, with a big smile on his face. And they say, "Shimshon, Samson, is that you? What are you doing here?" And he says, "I came to see my wife. Let me into the room. I want to see my wife." And they say, "Samson, Shimshon, you want to see your wife? After what you did, we thought that you don't want her anymore. We thought that you hate us. So we married her to someone else." And you could just imagine the fury in the eyes of Shimshon. And then they say to him, "But don't worry. She has a little sister who's more beautiful than her. If you want, we can arrange the marriage right away. You can marry his little sister." And Shimshon says, "That's it. I'm done with the Philistines, with the Philistines." And he goes down into these fields at the time when the wheat is ripe, after the people have worked the whole season to grow the wheat, and they're in the middle of harvesting it, and there's wheat piled up everywhere. And he takes hundreds of foxes and he ties their tails together with torches in between each pair of foxes, and he sets them loose in the fields right down here, and they set fire to the entire valley, destroying the harvest of the work of the entire year of the Philistines. And you could just imagine the scenery down here in the valley in the summer when it's very hot, the entire valley up in smoke. You could just picture it. This is the opening scene of the life of Samson. He starts his life as a good Israelite boy between Zorah and Eshtaol with the Spirit of God in him. But now he starts a new chapter in his life where he is enmeshed with the Philistines. The end of the story is that Samson finds himself bound up to the pillars of the temple of the Philistines, the pagan temple of the Philistines, with his eyes gouged out, and on his last breath, and he turns to God and he says, "God, give me my strength this one last time that I may take vengeance on the Philistines." And his arms are chained to the pillars of the temple, and God gives him back his strength for just one moment, and he pulls the pillars, and the building collapses, killing thousands of Philistines, and he dies there in the temple on the Philistine coast. And his brothers and his father, his family go down to the coast, and they collect his body from the Philistines, and they bring it back. Vayikaver bekever avotav ben Tzorah uben Eshtaol. And they bury him in the tomb of his ancestors between Tzorah and Eshtaol, So the story ends exactly where it began. The Spirit of God resounded in him between Zorah and Eshtaol, and he is buried at the end of his life between Zorah and Eshtaol.
This story is completely out of left field, just totally unexpected, against what you would think someone that God chose and given this power to would act, and supposedly this is the way God wanted it.
What is this story? Like, God chooses this person, causes him to be raised as this holy Nazarite, goes to all these precautions and everything, and what is his end? He dies in a Philistine temple, tied to the pillars, with his eyes gouged out after having married or having relations with 3 different Philistine women. Like, what are we supposed to learn from this story? Is Samson a holy person? Is he a bad person? Is he a confused person? What's going on, right? It's a very perplexing story.
So it feels like Hashem would be using him for his hashgacha, for his providence. That on the outside he looks like a disturbed, crazy person, but on the inside he's like a secret agent. He's like undercover, sent from Hashem to do all these things and to infiltrate the Philistines and to eventually get them to recognize Hashem.
That's exactly what's alluded to. So when Samson's parents hear from Samson that he wants to marry this Philistine woman, what exactly do they say? They say, couldn't you find anyone better to marry from our people? But then the book of Judges interjects and it says they did not know that it was from God, that he was looking for a pretext to take vengeance against the Philistines. And so what the rabbis tell us is that really the people of Dan were not such righteous people at that time. When the Jewish people, the people of Israel, are righteous, then God is willing to defend us with open miracles. For example, when we came out of Egypt, God brought down the walls of Jericho miraculously without firing a single shot, without any fight, right? But the people of Dan, they weren't in that state of righteousness that they merited God's open, clear,
open miracle,
miraculous defense.
So, that happened through a concealed way.
So what does God do? He raises up this one-of-a-kind, almost like a unique creation,
pure
Shimshon, who on the one hand, because of his purity and his Nazarite state, he's tapped into this divine superpower of sorts. But on the other hand, God puts it in him that he's constantly pulled towards the Philistines for whatever reason. He's pulled towards the Philistines in order to enmesh him with them, so that there can come about a way that God can take vengeance on the Philistines and protect the people of the tribe of Dan, even though they don't deserve anything more than that. And the tribe of Dan themselves are like, this Samson is a nuisance, we got to get rid of him. The neighboring tribe of Judah comes over and arrests him and hands him over. They want nothing to do with him, and probably afterwards they still didn't think it was anything miraculous. They just felt like this guy is a troublemaker.
Maybe that it had to be, I guess it had to be in a hidden way, because if it was an open way, you might say Dan's tribe is doing righteous when they weren't doing righteous. So God must, I imagine, had to do in a sort of backhanded, not so obvious way, these miracles, so people don't look at that and say, oh, that's the way we should be.
That's right.
Maybe.
And to me, like, what's the lesson for us from this story? The lesson for us from this story is that God is always with us. He always loves us. He always cares for us. If we will do what he wants and we'll live up to his expectations, he'll even do miracles for us.
Revealed miracles.
Revealed miracles. But even when we don't, and even when it seems that everything is just by chance, and it seems that nothing is going the way we want it, and it seems there's all kinds of nuisances and problems, God is still there pulling all the strings. And he's still protecting us and taking care of us. And ultimately,
recognizing that is actually higher.
Well, to be able to see the presence of God even when it's not revealed is very important. And even when we do behave the way that we're supposed to, that's no guarantee that God will do miracles, because ultimately God wants to conceal his presence in this world so that we can find him. It's almost like a game of hide and seek. He wants us to look for him. So to me, we can take a lot of strength from this story, and we can understand that even the things that don't seem the way they're supposed to be, or they don't seem perfect, not everything is a perfect Hollywood movie, you know? And look how much divine providence, like you were saying, we saw today
Sure.
as we were filming this.
The fact the camera is not shutting off now is a divine providence.
Yeah, we're running this on our last bit of battery, guys.
Yeah. The sun's setting. It's like
The last bit of daylight, the last bit of battery, and I got through the whole day, and this is my first pipe of
Wow.
the day.
Razak Baruch. Oh, that was a good one.
Shabbat Shalom. What a world God made.